So where I always start, I'm going to turn this around here because this is just easier for me. I usually start with the leg. So I kind of flip it over. This might be a little hard to see, but I cut down through here. And then the hip is in here, so I usually take the, and this is where the fillet knife is really nice. I just follow that bone down along the backbone. See, I've freed that up. And you do usually have to try to pop it out. Go through how we debone this leg. Basically, so it doesn't really matter which way you have it. I usually flip it sort of the inside up, outside down. And you're just going to take your knife and you'll feel the bone. The kneecap's quite large. So we've kind of gotten right down in here. Trying to feel where this is here. And I'm going to flip it around, and I'm on the other side of the thigh bone. And then I often, when I'm kind of on both sides, right, like that, I can take the, obviously doing all of this very carefully, because it's a very sharp knife. And I just kind of come up the other side, and you're left with very little meat on that hip socket. And then for the front part, the lower part of the leg's a little different. It's kind of got a funny angle to it. So I come down and try to free this up as best as I can. Sort of thing. Get to the other side. Sometimes we'll leave some of the tendon bits on the end there.
I do suggest cutting those off before grinding. They're hard work on the machine. And nobody wants to bite into that.
So then we get to this point where you've got the kneecap. And I kind of let the knife do a lot of it rather than try to sort of get in there and work too hard. So basically, there's a deboned rabbit leg. So I've gone ahead and taken off the other leg, so kind of same thing. We've got a pretty good amount of meat there. I'm going to put that off to the side and just sort of to speed things up a bit. So the next part that I usually take off is these belly flaps, which can have a lot of different uses. So one thing, the end of the ribs is kind of right about here. You can sort of see it, and you probably can't see it, but I'm going to kind of go through, work my way up, and free this off. The last rib here. Okay, there's the last rib. So I find the last rib, I usually just poke through. So take this fat off because you don't use a fat rabbit. Don't really want that per se.
What can I say? We feed them good.
So I've kind of got it freed up. So this is the loin in here. So what I can do is cut along the edge of the loin. Which sort of frees this belly flap up. There you go, comes off. Leaving the weight of the rabbit. So there you have a belly flap. So now we've never done it, but I have heard that you can make something something very similar to bacon out of these. So someday we're going to try it, but today I'm just going to put them off to the side. The next part I usually do is I take the front legs off. You can cut down the back just ever so slightly, and it frees up this layer that's sort of over top of the rib cage. You can cut right through here, like so, which frees it up from the front of the rib cage. And then it's a little thicker in meat here, but and there's the front leg freed up. Okay, so we've got the two front legs off now. This is probably one of the most finicky parts because there's a small little bone right in here which is a little hard to remove. So I usually kind of cut around it. And I probably won't even be able to show it to you.
It's like a collarbone or something.
Yeah, it's basically right in there. So kind of get that out. See if I can cut that right out. So that's just that little piece comes out. And there's no real better way that we know how to get that out. So that's your one little piece of wastage. And then again, this is the most tedious part of taking apart a rabbit.
Yeah, the front legs are definitely the worst part.
And they're the hardest to use whole, we find. So they pretty much are always a mandatory debone and grind. Just trying to kind of get into the leg. And just kind of doing really the same as what we did in the back leg here. As much as possible anyways. So in here is the shoulder blade, which is the hard part, the awkward part, sorry, to get around. I'm just going to kind of pull that back. You can see the shoulder blade in there. So I'm trying to, lighting's not the best. Free that up a bit. As I say, this is by far
the most finicky
the most finicky bit. And you'll feel at first like you're fighting a lot of bone. But you'll see in the end here, there's not as much bone in here as you think. So I've kind of freed it up on this one side. You can see the edge here. So I'm going to just try to cut down.
It's also a lot tougher to do it when you're trying to make it that the camera can see it.
Oh, yes.
Oh, there you go. Now you can see the bone.
Now you can see it sticking out there. It kind of has two ridges on it. You'll see in a moment. There's one of the ridges right now. Almost got it free. There probably are people who can do this a lot faster than I can, but it's a practice thing. There, that's freed up. More little bone in here. It's often a little hard to work around. Basically, that's all meat. And there's the bone that you're left with. And the last part, which I might be wrong on this, but we're going to take off the loins, which for right or for wrong, we just call the loins everything sort of
along
right
the
through
back.
all the way along the back. So we usually start up at the front and just kind of go down along the backbone. Rabbit backbones are a little bit odd. We'll see in a minute. Sorry, my hand is in the way, I apologize. Kind of like that, and then I usually turn it back around and I start trying to free up the front part of the loin or back, whatever you want to call it, first from the rib cage. You're just kind of following the contour. Usually if there's a bit of meat off the side, I usually try to cut that in two. Basically cutting this back to... I apologize for all the cat noises you can probably hear. We've locked them up so that they're not in our lap trying to eat this because
they're not happy about it because they eat a raw meat diet, which is rabbit.
Partially rabbit. So you can see I've come back to this rib here. I'm basically going to do something very similar and just follow the edge of that rib, which frees that up. And then I can start to work on this part a bit more. And this is where the backbone is funny because there's actually sort of two knobs to the vertebrae. You can kind of see them. This is one. And so I just keep cutting down along and get that freed up, it helps. And then back at the hip, I usually cut in underneath my knife. Just kind of frees that up a bit. Apologize, I keep spinning this around. It's just kind of getting it to a position that's easiest to work. So I usually end up kind of freeing up both ends here. So I've just kind of done that. Quite to the then almost, or this almost will peel back here in a second. Not quite there. Now I'm past. So what basically happens next is you can sort of flop this piece of meat inward and you'll see these other little bones protruding along the backbone, and you just kind of free it up a little bit. You don't have to cut down in deep at the moment. And then you want to follow in. And that's a kitten making noise that the kitten can't jump on the table, so you're just kind of freeing it up in down to the base of those part of the vertebrae. And we're almost done here. Always a little bit of a fine push up here. And there is a piece of meat you're left with, which we always call it the loins because we usually keep this separate, and this does go into stir fries and other things that you would
cut up like chicken breast, basically.
Yeah, you chunk it up into some little slices and whatnot, and it's quite good for that. So